You walk into a room and something just shifts. It's not dramatic, nobody else notices. But you feel it immediately. The pile of unopened mail on the counter, the jacket draped over the chair that no one sat in, the three half-empty water bottles lined up next to each other for no reason. Something in your chest tightens. Something in your brain quietly refuses to move forward. You're supposed to be relaxing, or working, or just existing normally in your own home. But the clutter is loud, not literally. It doesn't make a sound, but it takes up space in your mind, the same way static takes over a signal. Everything becomes a little harder, a little heavier, a little less possible. And the wildest part? Nobody around you gets it. Your roommate doesn't see the mess. Your partner says it's fine, we'll deal with it later. Your coworker somehow thrives in a disaster zone of sticky notes and stacked folders. And you're standing there, genuinely struggling to think straight, feeling like there is something fundamentally wrong with you. There isn't. What's actually happening in your brain is more interesting than anyone gave you credit for. Here's the thing. People who can't function in a cluttered space are not controlling. They're not dramatic. They're not pretending to be bothered so they have an excuse to clean. They are experiencing a genuine neurological response to visual disorder. Their brains are processing the environment differently, more intensely, more completely. And what feels like a personality quirk is actually the surface of something deep, something your nervous system has been doing quietly, on your behalf, your entire life. Science has a name for it, actually a few. Researchers who study environmental psychology, which is the study of how physical spaces affect human emotion, thought, and behavior, have consistently found that cluttered environments increase cortisol levels. Cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone, the one that gets released when you're in danger, when you're overwhelmed, when your brain perceives a threat it needs to manage. For most people in a mild mess, the cortisol response is small, barely noticeable. They adjust and move on. But for some people, and this is where it gets interesting, the response is significantly stronger. Their brains treat unresolved visual disorder the way other brains treat unresolved danger. Not as background noise, as a signal, as a problem that needs to be solved before anything else can happen. This is connected to a concept called cognitive load. Think about it this way. Your brain has a limited amount of mental bandwidth at any given moment. Every piece of information in your environment takes up a tiny slice of that bandwidth. A clean, organized room, low demand. Most of your mental resources stay available for thinking, creating, feeling, connecting. A cluttered room, high demand. Every object that's out of place becomes a microtask, a silent obligation, a small, unspoken question your brain keeps returning to. Does this need to be dealt with? Should this be somewhere else? When did this get here? For people with high visual sensitivity, the math adds up fast. The cluttered room isn't just messy, it's consuming. And by the time they sit down to work, or decompress, or even watch something on the couch, they've already spent a significant portion of their cognitive reserves just processing the space around them. There's also something called sensory processing sensitivity, a trait identified by psychologist Aron, which describes people whose nervous systems are neurologically wired to process stimuli more deeply than average. Roughly 15 to 20% of the population is thought to carry this trait. It's not a disorder. It's not a flaw. It's a variation in how the nervous system takes in and responds to the world. People with high sensory processing sensitivity notice more. They pick up on subtle details others miss. They process emotional and environmental information on a level that most people simply aren't doing. And in a cluttered environment, that sensitivity becomes relentless because there is so much to notice, and their brain notices all of it. Here's what nobody talks about. This same trait is also associated with higher creativity, deeper empathy, richer inner experience, and a stronger ability to pick up on nuance in relationships, art, and ideas. The very thing that makes the pile of dishes unbearable is the same thing that makes you feel music in a way that stops you mid-breath. It's the same thing that makes you the person people come to when they need someone who actually listens. The sensitivity isn't the problem. The sensitivity is the whole point. But let me be honest with you for a second. Not everyone who struggles in cluttered spaces is wired the same way. In fact, the experience breaks down into a few very distinct types. There's the first type, the ones I'd call the environment-dependent thinker. These are people who genuinely cannot access their own mind in a messy space. It's not that they're irritated, it's that they're blocked. Sit them in front of a clean desk in a tidy room, and ideas flow. Put them in a cluttered cafe or a disorganized office, and the creative well goes completely dry. Their external environment is deeply connected to their internal state. They're not being precious about it. The space is literally setting the conditions for what their brain can or cannot do. If you ask them why they clean before they start a project, they'll tell you, because I can't start until it feels right. And that feeling is neurological, not performative. Then there's the second type, the chronic anticipator. This person isn't just bothered by the clutter itself, they're bothered by what it implies. The unread mail isn't just paper, it's a reminder of things undone. The pile of laundry isn't just clothes, it's evidence of falling behind. Every object out of place becomes a small symbol of everything that hasn't been handled yet, and the accumulation of those symbols creates a kind of low-grade dread that hums underneath everything they do. They can be in a perfectly good mood and walk into a messy kitchen and feel, within 30 seconds, vaguely anxious without quite being able to say why. Their brain isn't responding to the disorder. It's responding to the story the disorder is telling. And then there's the third type, the sensory peacekeeper. These are people for whom clutter doesn't feel chaotic. It feels loud, physically, viscerally loud. Not as a metaphor, the visual noise of a cluttered space translates directly into a kind of internal noise that makes it hard to relax, hard to feel at ease, hard to access a sense of calm. When they walk into a clean, open, organized space, something in their nervous system exhales, not because they're neat freaks, but because quiet environments, visually quiet environments, are where they actually feel safe enough to rest. The preference for order isn't about aesthetics, it's about access to peace. Tell me, which one felt most like you? The one who can't think, the one who sees unfinished business in every pile, or the one who just needs the room to be quiet so they can breathe? Drop it in the comments. Because here's what all three types share, and this is the part that most people never get to hear. The struggle with clutter is not a character flaw. It is not perfectionism run amok. It is not anxiety in disguise. Well, sometimes it is anxiety, but the anxiety didn't come from nowhere. For a lot of people, the sensitivity to environmental disorder developed as a coping mechanism. Think about the last time you walked into a space and felt the mess before you saw it. That hypervigilance, that constant scan of the environment for what's out of place, is something the nervous system learns, often in childhood, often in environments where chaos was unpredictable, where a messy house meant something was about to happen, where disorder was a sign, where keeping things in order was one of the few things a kid could actually control. The adult who can't function in a cluttered space often learned very early that the state of the environment contained information about safety, about what was coming, about whether it was okay to relax, and so their brain kept doing what it learned to do, kept reading the room, kept monitoring for disorder, not because they're neurotic, because they were paying attention when it mattered. And some nervous systems never fully receive the memo that the threat has passed. That's not weakness, that's protection. Running past its expiration date, maybe, but protection at its core. So if you're someone who straightens up before you can sit down, who can't focus while the sink is full, who feels the pile of stuff on the counter like a low-grade pressure behind your eyes, who walks into someone else's chaotic apartment and immediately starts doing the math of how long it would take to fix, you are not difficult, you are not high maintenance, you are not making other people's lives harder for no reason. Your brain is exquisitely tuned to your environment. It is processing information most people filter out entirely. It is taking the world seriously in a way that is sometimes exhausting, yes, but also, in the right conditions, extraordinary. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are just wired for environments that match the precision of your own mind. If this felt like someone finally said out loud what you've been quietly experiencing, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. The next video is going to go deeper into how your environment shapes more than you think. It's a different angle, but the same kind of depth. I'll see you there.